Hi there, folks, and welcome to week 10 in class. Thank you for being here today as we start our discussion of the Great Famine of 1845 to 49. As always, before we start, let's do a quick check-in. Do you have your notebook and writing utensil in front of you? Did you read this week's section of Hungering for America? That should be chapter 8. Were there any questions you had about the reading or about what we were about to discuss? And as always, if there are any accommodations you need for this lesson, please email me or talk to me in private. Any questions? Let's dive into the learning objectives then. From this lesson, I'm hoping that you garner a handful of new information to improve your understanding of the world we live in today. In this lesson, I am hoping that you will be able to identify when the Irish famine took place, name the crop involved, along with what caused the crop failure. I hope that you will learn how political in nature this historical disaster was, as we discuss the numerous causes of the famine. And finally, the goal is to gain an understanding of how this event shaped Irish society and other populations at the time and to our present. A quick pre-test for you. Since we are utilizing the YouTube format this week, go ahead and scroll to the comment section and leave a comment answering this week's check-in. What impacts and causes of the Irish famine can you name before this lesson? Go ahead and pause the video and take a moment to do that. Let's look at an overview of the ingredients that led to this disaster. Firstly, we have our crop, the potato, as many of you probably know, with this event sometimes being referred to as the Irish potato famine. Secondly, we have the absentee landlord system set up by British colonizers. To the point of the famine, this was an outdated landowning system in which exploited the Irish population and restricted Irish private property. The final factor we discuss in class today is the apathy held by the British Parliament for conditions of Irish people under British rule. Observing some of the exploitative actions by major British figures, as well as making some connections to religious connotations. The potato was first cultivated by the Inca in Peru. It came about 5,000 to 8,000 years ago, probably cultivated by the ancestors of the Inca. It was brought to Europe by Spanish conquistador fleets, and its explosion of dependency across the world in Europe and in America coincides with the Industrial Revolution. It was crossbreeding of potatoes by European farmers sometime between 1844 and 45 that brought about Phytophthora infestan, and that would be the blight that affected all of these crops. A common misconception is that the blight only affected Ireland. In reality, a season of heavy rain across Europe created an environment for the blight to survive, eliminating 87% of potato harvests in places like Belgium, 70% in Holland, and starvation was at times a real issue in Eastern Europe as well. So why would a population turn to dependency on one sole crop? The answer to this is the British landlord system. The region had been conquered in the name of Great Britain by Oliver Cromwell in a bloody war beginning in 1649 and lasting until 53. With this absentee landlord system beginning and continuing to grow into the 1800s, what this meant for Ireland was a drawn-out system of land ownership in which the original landowners employed multiple middlemen over the course of many generations, to the point of having 3 to 4 landlords divvying up smaller and smaller portions of land. All the while, all profits from these subdivisions continued to go to the pockets of British landlords that had likely never stepped foot on Ireland's soil during their lifetimes. For every extra middleman in the British system, rent would be raised, and tenants would divide their own land in order to make payments. The system continually shrunk Irish-owned land. In 1841, 45% of all agricultural holdings in Ireland were under 5 acres. This lack of land equated to a lack of profit and a lack of land to grow food on. Thus, the Irish needed a crop to sustain while not taking up too much space. The answer here is potatoes. Now we can dive into the political involvement in this event. It wasn't until September 12th, 1845, in which word of the potato blight had reached English presses, and it was received with mixed emotions, and throughout the majority of the famine was constantly plagued by accusations of being conspiratorial. This is rooted in the battle between Liberal Whigs and Prime Minister Robert Peel. Whigs fighting for market stability, while Peel aptly moved to use demands for Irish support to spur economic reform and repeal the corn laws that restricted American imports on grain. Corn is the term that British people used for grain at the time. Initially, Peel created an actual relief plan in which cornmeal would be imported through the grain ban and then dispersed in Ireland at stock price rather than market price, making it much more attainable for the Irish poor. Along with this, road projects ensued to improve Ireland's infrastructure, as well as create a form of income. The glaring issue when it came to this plan was that while the grain had no residence in British markets and it wouldn't be a direct intervention and could pass through the corn laws, it would be paid for through lower landlords' fundraising money within Ireland from their tenants to buy the cornmeal that would be matched by the British government to deliver the meal to regional food depots in order to keep the Irish poor from starving without removing them from the economy, meaning that the lower landlords were expected to fundraise money, and then whatever that money bought would be matched by the British government, and they would get all of that grain. The low landlords expected to fundraise were to this point becoming too poor themselves, though, and the plan may have worked if it had been enacted years earlier, but throughout the process in poor regions, it became evident that there was no money to be fundraised, as if anyone had the money to donate, they would have already bought food. People were starving. There was no room for an Irishman to donate to the cause without immediate detrimental effects on their own lives. Often pawning their remaining possessions to donate, only to receive less food than what they would have gotten if they had taken their money directly to the market. In 1845, Peel openly fought to repeal the Corn Laws, and to this point, the Irish famine had become a partisan issue in Parliament. More dramatics would ensue as Peel would actually be ousted from his position for his attempts to repeal the Corn Laws, only to be returned to his position after the Parliament could not form a government. This time, Peel sided with the Whigs and fully repealed the Corn Laws in order to see change, only to then get ousted immediately after again. As this disaster continued, faith in the validity of the Irish crisis decreased. Remember that British citizens only knew of their government's inaction on the matter on top of rumors. They weren't subjected to video news like we see today. With this, so did the organization of relief efforts in the region. Reports of growing trends of Protestant landlords in charge of administering food, demanding Catholic Irish to openly convert in order to receive their due rations. This note of religion is an important factor to think about when discussing the Irish famine and the country of Ireland as a whole. Protestant dominance was a key cultural phenomenon in this region for centuries, to the point of the Irish famine in the mid-1800s. The effects of this can be seen even today, as the concentration of Protestant people in Northern Ireland live in Ulster. That is that purple to pink area in the 1861 map down there. This area of Ulster in Northern Ireland would remain under English rule due to the Protestant population after the independence of Ireland being declared on December 29th, 1937. Following the ousting of Robert Peel, Charles Trevelyan and assumed the position of the first Baronet of Ireland, acting as head of colonial affairs in Ireland. He would undoubtedly bring about the brunt of hardship during the year of Black 47. This would be the worst year during this whole crisis and in which the most deaths occurred. To the dismay of Irish people, however, this change would only prove to place greater stress on the poor, as Trevelyan saw the famine as more of an opportunity to change law, not that Peel didn't see it as an opportunity to change law. But Trevelyan also saw it as a way to anglicize the country. Trevelyan formed the relief plan that he proposed with basis in his mentor Thomas Malthus. Malthusian theory is the theory that states that human food production will not be able to keep up with the growth in human population, resulting in disease, famine, war, and calamity. But with this being said, it should be noted that this theory was written nearly directly at Irish people in order to write off the majority of the famine to be caused by Irish laziness, as well as an emphasis on the non-intervention in the market. With this, food depots would close and grain would be sold by English merchants at market price. Laissez-faire economics caused food prices to spike again, and so did the eviction rate. Road projects, now dubbed famine roads, had begun to lose participants as payments were delayed by the British bureaucracy, and the workers themselves died of exhaustion right next to the roads they had been cleared. Thoughts and takeaways. What do we know now? I'm hoping that from this lesson you garnered the information, garnered an understanding of the dangers of societal dependence on one crop, and that the Great Famine was a largely political issue, often debated to be caused by ineffective colonial rule by Great Britain. That will conclude our lesson today. Thank you for your time. Please fill out your 5Ws worksheet, and please let me know at the end of the form if you have any questions or further inquiries in this topic.